are talking about the horror movie anthology, A Night of Horror, Nightmare Radio. And this obviously has multiple directors, obviously, because it's an anthology. Now, the wraparound story here is this host of a radio show. Now, he is doing some late night, post-midnight show where ultimately callers come in and he'll tell them a horror story. So there is the wraparound story. We have a variety of callers that do call in, and we get a variety of stories that are told to us initially by this radio presenter, but obviously we see the kind of the full movie. And there is actually a through line with the wraparound story as well. So it's very much your kind of your creep show, that sort of thing, Tales from the Crypt, that kind of movie. So without kind of going into each kind of story by themselves, I will just say, I thought on the positives first of all, the stories here have a surprisingly high production value. This is a very lavishly produced horror anthology movie. I feel like some of these productions really have got a reasonably high budget, because there is some excellent production design, some excellent sets, some excellent costuming, everything here I think is to a very high standard. And we do have quite a variety in regards to stories as well. Some of them are kind of the ghost stories, some of them are more body horror, some of them are, you know, monsters in your house type thing. The standout one for me was, I believe, the second story, which is the first of the real stories. It's kind of like an intro one, which is technically the first story. But then we have this second one, which involves this, I think it's like an Australian outback, and we have this, in the Old West sort of times, 100 or so years ago, and there is this young girl that has died, and the family want to have a photograph of her to remember her by. So they have this woman who brings her young daughter and photographs her. Now the woman ends up trying to console the grieving mother outside. It's up to this young daughter to try and take the photograph of this this corpse. However, things take a supernatural twist. It's very good, very well done, with some excellent effects, some excellent kind of atmosphere building. It's good performances. Really, really well done, that film. And to be fair, all of the films here, I wouldn't say there is necessarily a bad film. There are some that are mediocre, and some that aren't particularly interesting. But I don't feel there's films here. None of them are badly made films, but don't really. Some of them maybe don't get quite as interesting as they want to. The actual intro film itself, involving this kind of invisible woman sort of type thing, I thought was pretty fun and really kind of like has a very distinct kind of visual style. And there's actually another one I liked, which didn't have any supernatural stuff at all, which was just this guy who basically he's trialling a new kind of penal system where, you know, he raped someone, and the family of the victim get to choose him to be kind of dismembered, basically, but still alive, but just sort of have various kind of like limbs and kind of things taken off as a sort of punishment over a course of a few months and stuff. And then he has to kind of go and sort of say, this is what's going to happen into schools and stuff like that. So if you commit the crime, this is what's going to happen. And it's quite horrifying, because it's like ends up being quite cruel and quite kind of disturbing in a lot of ways. Do I have some critiques? I feel the wraparound story starts off well, but I feel it becomes not as interesting as the film kind of progresses. And the other thing I would say is, despite some of these movies, without kind of going into sort of necessarily details and spoilers of each one, there's three stories here that are very similar. So there's three stories that involve a clawed humanoid creature in someone's house and them dealing with it, basically. And it's three separate stories. All of them have the relatively the same kind of setup. So sometimes with anthologies, they are made specifically for the anthology, and sometimes they are just short films that are then kind of put together. And it makes me think maybe that was the case here, because I don't know if these films were necessarily, because they're so similar, and like three of them as well. So, you know, I don't think it was particularly a good idea to have so many kind of similar stories all in one. But overall, this is a solid anthology movie. Really good, lavish productions. Really, some fantastic lighting here. The soundtrack as well is absolutely fantastic. I would definitely recommend this, and I'm not a huge fan of anthology films, to be honest with you, because I never feel like you get a huge amount of characterization. But for the most part, I think this one succeeds. And then no real duds. There's just some of them aren't particularly interesting. Some of them are average, but some of them are kind of good. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.